Okay guys, it's been a while. Life got in the way, stuff like that happens, client builds take priority, but we're back. And not in the best of sense. We're not really progressing anywhere forwards, we're actually going back. The reason is that the Veilside RX-7 took a bit of a tumble due to some over-curious toddler. But that's okay, just a model. We can go ahead and fix that. We're going to show you how to fix possibly a broken model. In this case, a lot of the resin kits, especially this one, comes as a full piece. So it's been already cleared, the color's gone on, everything great. So how do we fix this? So our kind of first step here is to glue it back on, but I'm going to kind of run you guys through how this is actually going to work. So what we're going to start off with is we're going to cut some little score lines in here with a hobby blade. Do the same on the piece that has fallen off here, and then we're going to stick it back on. Now for this, I'm going to use a thin type CA, so I don't have the piece kind of bulging off a bit with excess, and there's not going to be a whole lot that comes out of the sides. So we're going to go ahead and do that really quick. Remember my own steps before I start doing stuff. So the reason why we're cutting little score marks into here first is it's going to give the piece some adhesion with what we're going to do to it, and it's also going to allow us to kind of settle the part in a little bit better. And once we've done this, we've glued it back on and let it dry, we're going to come back and we're going to put a little bit of filler primer onto here. So you can use kind of really any putty, so to speak, but probably the better ones for this is the Mr. Surfacer 500 series, which is a very, it's a thicker pigment, so it almost builds up like a primer, but it builds up very, I'm going to say, not as thick as, say, a you know, like a normal surface primer, like a 1500, but it gives us enough to build up the layer slowly. So you get this piece sit in here at the utmost concentration. Okay, and it's not going to fit 100%, but I'm going to get it close in some of the larger dimensions. So what I want to do here is try and get that kind of lip going across here. I want that to fit as best as I can. Okay. I can go ahead and kind of tear off these bigger chunks that are sitting in here. And there we go. And this probably happened in one of the better spots. It kind of stopped right at that trunk line, and smaller, difficult part might be up here at the top. But most of that will get kind of covered up as best it can by that kind of dark delineation that I have going on between the black and the orange here. Just making sure that all that's settled. And then I'll just come in with a very thin bead of the thin CA, and then just let it work itself into that crack and crevice. Come back here from this side. We'll kind of do the same. I'm just going to let capillary action take over. What we're going to do is I'm not going to kick that with accelerator. I'm not going to do anything but just leave it. And we're going to leave this for at least 24 hours. So that way when we come back to it, we know that the bond has fully been made and we can go ahead and start actually doing the work on it. So we'll come back in 24 hours when this is fully cured. Alright guys, so here we are 24 hours later, and we've got the piece glued back on. It's nice and secure, and just having a look over it, so we've got a little bit of a raised area here, and then there's a big hot mess going on the inside of where the kind of trunk meets this kind of ducktail type spoiler. So the next kind of thing we want to do is we're not going to go super heavy on the grit. We're going to go kind of like with a medium grit. And what essentially I'm going to do is I'm going to work on those areas. They're a little bit taller, right? And we're just going to lightly work our way down, okay? And we're going to kind of roughly even things out. So as you can see here, maybe if I can get a little bit more. So you can see here where there's kind of the gap that we're trying to sand down. What I'm going to try and do is focus more of my attention over on this side here, and then occasionally pass over that gap area, because I know this part's a lot higher than this one, given that substantial gap. As you can kind of see here, I've got the edge cut off of the sanding stick here, which is also really nice to get into really small tight spaces. So for instance, the back of the spoiler here, I can just easily get up inside of there and sand a lot of this up. All the extra loose clear that's kind of flaking. Remember, we did put CA glue here, so there is going to be a bit of a tedious work that we have to do to get this thing back down in level. But we're also not trying to waste, you know, a rather expensive resin kit for no reason. So I'm going to get to kind of sanding this up a bit here and get it to the point where, you know, I'm happy with it. So what the end result is going to be is where we've kind of got a good gradient of where we've sanded in the trouble area. So we're going to get a good fade from, you know, this clear down to, you know, our damaged areas. We're going to try and make it as little as possible, because then afterward we're going to come in with some filler, and we're going to tape off kind of this section here. So you can see where this panel line kind of carries around. It hasn't gone past that, which is excellent. I got pretty lucky on mine. And it also didn't go below this line here. So what I'm going to try and do is keep all of my work relegated to within that paneled area. So once we've sanded it down, once we've got, you know, kind of a good base to work with, we're going to go ahead and fill in. We're going to, you know, use a thicker material
and fill this in, sand and shape that, and then, slowly progress up to a thinner filler, and then, gradually go on to a thick paint like the Mr. Surfacer 500, and then go up to, say, like a Mr. Surfacer 1000. If you've got kind of the in-between, the Mr. Surfacer 1200, sure, you can go with that one as well, and then just polish that off, or go to a 1500. But we're probably only going to make it to the 1000, and then clean that up. So let's get started on that, and we'll be back when we've got a little bit more progress. Alright guys, so we've got the bulk of the material sanded off, and we've got no lips or edges going on here. And as you can see, we've kind of followed that panel line around to kind of section off this area. So what we're going to do now is apply that thicker putty that I was talking about. For this one, I'm just going to use the Tamiya white putty. You can use the gray stuff. I'm not really a fan of it. It just, to me, it doesn't feel great. It's a lot more gritty. And for the white stuff, all I'm really do is grab on this tack of it and then just kind of press it and roll it into the seam, and then just kind of chop off a bit. Right, I'm only targeting really the area itself. I'm not slathering it on in a huge quantity, right, where I'd have to try and reshape finer details, lips and edges. And then take a little bit more. And so for here, this kind of lip edge here, all I'm really going to do is, again, just kind of take it, force it in, but then using the edge of the kind of molding tool here, and press it in and get those hard edge details to form, so that it's not a hassle to try and do them at a later point. Just sanding. It is possible, but it saves your brain a whole lot of time, and then you don't get those shelf of doom projects that just sit there and never actually get back to. Again, just those difficult areas, I'm just going to press it in and then shape it with the tool. It's a little bit easier on those flatter areas where you can just get it down and in there. Okay, so we've got that all plastered up now, puttied up, filled, however you want to call it. So we're just going to leave this as it is, and we're going to give that a, the thing says it's only, I think it's like 3 or 4 hours to be fully cured, but what we're going to do is give it at least 24 to 48. I mean, for me, it might be, by the end of the weekend, I'll get back to it. That just gives enough time for the putty to cure properly, and to have all of the moisture dry out so that it shrinks down, and when we do sand it, it'll kind of be the final shape that we actually want it to be. And again, we're not slathering it all over this and then sanding the whole thing back down. We're just using the thicker style of putty, getting in the larger cracks and divots. Then we'll go ahead and sand it back, and continue our steps from there. So we'll see you guys in a few days. For you, it's going to be seconds, but in a few days when we clean this all back up and go on to the next step. Alright, so now that this has had a few days to fully dry and cure, we're going to go ahead and start sanding it all back. So for this, I'm just going to use a finer grit just because I want to slowly work down. I don't want to eat through too much of the work that I've already sanded. And I'll just slowly work at that until we've got a nice clean area to work with. And again, we just want to go little by little. We don't want to start taking off swaths of paint and making our lives more difficult. Just slowly but surely taking down the filler and the putty until we've got a good delineation of where the putty is versus where our resin and you can see here some of the those kind of larger kind of pockets away from the main sort of break, and that's where a lot of the clear was, and then that's just the filler in between the clear. We'll just bring it down a little bit further. So now that we've sanded back the majority of the white putty that we put on there, so the thicker putty, we're going to move to the next step and we're going to put on some thinner glazing putty. This just happens to be the Bondo branded one from 3M. It's a lot thinner, can get to some smaller spaces. Just going to stir the top up here. And again, we're just going to go along the area of interest here. And I'm not covering anywhere I don't need to. I'm essentially just putting it along the same line as my previous putty job, if anything a little bit within the lines. Because we've already determined where the spots need to sink in. We don't need to create any extra work for ourselves by putting it, all over, unless there was a significant amount of sink marks or something similar to that. But there isn't, so we don't need to. If you do go a little bit over, that's fine. That's the point of the paint. If I'm trying to just scrape off a little extra so I don't have to dig into the bottle again, that's fine. Doesn't need to be super precise and perfect work. Just needs to, get the job done essentially by putting the putty down. And that's also a reason why we have the tape here, just to kind of hold those small tiny little mistakes in line. And again, we're going to start off the same process. We're going to wait a few days, let that completely dry and shrink down, and then we'll go ahead and bring that back, and then we'll start moving on to the primers. So we've done the initial sanding and leveling, and we've put the thicker putty down, and then we sanded that back, and we've put the thinner putty down. Now we're going to sand that back, and then we're going to put the thick paint down, which is even thinner than the putty. And then from there we can move up to the next kind of gradient of pigment with the Mr. Surfacer series. So we're going to start at the 500 and go to the 1000, clean it all up, see how it looks, and then we're going to move on from there to the 1500, finish it off, repaint it, and have a look at the final result. So we'll move on to that. Alright guys, and here we have the body now re-cleared. I've got the black back on there. Obviously there's a couple of spots where those rivets got hidden, but we can go ahead and just repaint those black. But as you can see, our repair job here is fixed. Right, we don't have that. Thankfully it cracked along this this panel line here, so that's not a huge issue. But everywhere else, even in the complex areas, we got those fixed and managed. So all we need to do really now is start with the final assembly. So we can get back to that. We can finish off this build once and for all. But this is just kind of a PSA, sort of. You know, if you have issues with a model, don't necessarily give up and throw it in the trash right away. You know, think of creative solutions to repair the damage that's been done, right? You know, take it in stride, put it off to the side for a bit. You know, it happens. Nobody's perfect, but it's a good opportunity to learn from mistakes and learn how to resolve issues when they come up, right? So I learned a couple of things, right? Don't let little children into the room when things are on drying shelves. But at the same time, I, you know, grew a little bit as a father and learned, hey, you know what, mistakes happen. You know, this isn't a big deal. It's just a model at the end of the day. You know, even as something with the price points that that these kits tend to have, and I found a solution that worked, and now we're back on the road to repair. So, you know, we're gonna get back at it, and I'm gonna move on and you know, learn from my mistakes. So thanks for watching this episode, guys. I'll get right on to finishing the installation of all the other parts, interior and the base, so we can finally get this build wrapped up. But thanks again for watching. Hope this helped a couple of you kind of get that Shelf of Doom Queen back out and move forward with it, because I'd like to see what you guys have come across as far as damage and repair. So let me know in the comments below and share your progress. I'd love to see it. So thanks again for watching, guys, and have a good one.